Hi guys, it's Blackie. Okay, and welcome to the Master Woodsman series. This is the last chapter of the shelter series. Now in shelter we started with zero shelter. Then we went to where we have no resources but we can create a shelter. Then we went to tarps where we had resources. Then we went to where we had hammocks, tarps, and stuff to get us up off the ground, etc. Now we're going with tents, okay? Now, I'm not going to bore you with 50 different G and sizes of tents. You know what a tent is. But I want you to have a good overview of the job of tents and how tents should apply to us. Okay? So first of all, what is the smallest basic tent? That's going to be a bivvy bag. A bivvy bag is simply a sleeping bag cover that you can zip closed and is waterproof. And so you can lay down on the ground without any tarp or anything in rain and remain relatively dry and secure. Now there is a step up called a hooped bivvy, and that's where it has a rod that sits into it and holds the top up off of you, so it isn't laying on you and you're feeling the rain beating on you. It's actually holding it up like a roof. Okay. For you ultralight guys that are going hiking in extreme ranges where you got to tote everything on your back and you got to tote so much food because you have no chance for resupply and things like that, a bivvy sack may be the way to go because it is technically the lightest of a true enclosed shelter and the smallest. Now you can think about the cover that goes onto the military sleep system, the Gore-Tex cover. That's a bivvy bag is what it is. And you could use it standalone, where I could take it, open it up, slide a sleeping pad into it, get into it and zip it up. Yes, you could technically do that with your sleeping bag of your own or whatever and use it, and it will work for that. But to me personally, I've always found such ideas very claustrophobic. If it did not have a hoop, one of the things that I would do would be take a green little branch and cut it and bend it in a hoop shape and put it inside with me. So I'm laying on my back, I stick one side here and it goes like this, and stick the other side here and have like socks or something stuck on it to keep the bottom from poking a hole, you know, round it off with your knife real good. And so the pressure of it up above it would hold it up off of me. Okay. There was a short time back in the 80s that I did bivvy sacks and hooped bivvies because I was doing a lot of hiking for range and in mountainous conditions, and I wanted to carry the lightest possible tent when I didn't want to use a hammock, because in the places I were going there weren't a lot of trees, there wasn't a lot of hammocking because of that. So the hoop bivvy can be viable for that, but it has a great disadvantage. There is no room, guys. It's enough room for you to lay down and just a minimum of gear. I mean, put your canteen or your water bottle in here with me and your flashlight. Excuse me, and that's about it. Everything else has got to stay outside. It's got to be tied to the tree over there, whatever. And rain and inclement weather does not work on your schedule. And so I get set up and I go and get in my bivvy sack and I go to bed, and life's great. And during the night a storm comes in, I wake up next morning and it's raining cats and dogs and I'm stuck in my bivvy, and 10 feet away over there is my pack, and it's waterproof, but all my rain gear is in it because there ain't no room in here for me to bring rain gear to. You see what I'm saying? If I had thought about it and knew the rain was coming, I'd have made some sort of plan, but I didn't. And so now you got to either just lay there and you can't get up and do nothing, or you have to get up and get sopping wet. And so that's a big disadvantage to the bivvies. One step up is going to be today, back in my day we called it a pup tent, but it's just a small nylon tents. Now these can be very viable as a single person camping tent, sometimes two people if they're real friendly. But realistically those small ones are really meant to be a one person tent with gear. Now at this point let's discuss design just a second. The footprint and the shape will change, okay, but there's this basic design, and the design is it starts with the bathtub, and that means that the floor of the tent comes across and then it rolls up on the sides like this. Now this height may be 4, 5, 6 inches. It may be a foot. It depends on the tent. But this forms a bathtub all the way around you. And this was the idea that if your tent was sitting there and you had just a deluge and the ground couldn't absorb the water and the water puddled up on the ground, you got an inch of water, it didn't flow into the tent, see. You had a 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 inch wall there that would act like a waterproof barrier. And usually the bathtub is heavier coated than the rest of the tent because it's got to be basically a bathtub. It means it'll hold water. And it literally will, which can be a detriment. We'll get to that in just a second. But that water can't flow in from the outside along the bottom or along the edge. Now, where the end of the bathtub ends, go away, big buzzer. I got yellow jackets and hornets buzzing around me right now. From that edge up to the apex is usually some sort of mosquito mesh or some sort of netting, okay? This gives you adequate airflow. It also will have a disadvantage. I'll talk about that in a minute. But it does give you an airy, roomy. And if it's not inclement, it's not going to be a heavy dew or whatever, you can leave the top cover off, which is the rain fly. So you can lay there and look up and see the stars and keep the bugs off of you. That's an advantage. How the tent stands up is by usually today shock corded fiberglass or some sort of pole, okay? And these are given lengths of a pole with a piece of elastic between them, so they all fold up. But when you open it up, they slide together. They don't fall apart. They slide together. And tick, 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 and you got a nice long pole. And in the top of your tent will be an X like that of tubes, and you're going to slide that pole in through those X's. You're going to go to the corner and you're going to put the end of that pole into a socket there. Then you're going to walk back to the far diagonal corner and you're going to bow up like that the roof. So I stick it in the corner over here, this flows up, and then I pull it and stick it in this one. And then I got another one on this way. So it forms an X over the top. And that holds the roof up off of me and gives me support. Advantage, lightweight, easy, quick and easy to put up. Disadvantage, it's not that rigid. And what that means in English is in an extreme heavy downpour, it will sag down under the load. That pole will kind of twist out of the way. Instead of being straight up like this, it'll kind of twist one way and the other, and this end will go that way and the other end will go the other way, and it'll sag down under the pressure of heavy rain or snow or whatever pushing down. So you need to kind of be aware of that. Now, over the whole top of it will be a rain fly. And this will be a sil nylon or something like that material that's been coated. And it is a non-breathable material. And that's the reason you have to have all this mesh. Why don't we just make a tent that's all that? Well, it's a trash bag. If you seal it up and get into it and seal it up, there's no airflow and you could suffocate. So you have to have the airflow. And because of that, to keep the cost down, if it was some sort of Gore-Tex or something that could actually breathe, the price of that thing would be. So I'm sure that someone's going to point out in the comments of, Blackie, this such and such tent made by this is completely enclosed and everything, and I bet you it's a house payment. I bet you it ain't something that the average beer drinker can afford. So to keep the cost down, they use a non-breathable coating, okay? And this rain fly that you're going to put over the outside of the tent, in a perfect world, the rain falling straight down would hit it, would run off of the edge of it, and here's the edge of your bathtub, okay? From here up to nylon mesh. Here comes a tarp. There's a gap here. That way airflow can still come in. So the rain runs off and drips, and you've got a gap, and everything's great and beautiful, and you are dry. Real world, what happens is this. Your tent is sitting like this at an angle. That two layers of here's the rain fly and here's the bathtub to the mesh. The wind comes this way and does this and goes between them. This will actually lift up and it blows straight in the side. So if you have a blowing rain, everything inside that tent's going to get wet. Not a drop is going to come through the top. It's all going to come through the side where the awning lifts up because of wind. It'll act like a wing, and it'll blow through that mesh to the inside. And remember I said that bathtub holds water? For quite a few years, because I'm a hammock camper, when me and my wife would go, she did not want to be in a hammock. She wanted her own tent. So we had one of these pop-up nylon tents. And I would put her in a little low cot in it or whatever and do everything in my power to make her comfortable. But if we got into a blowing storm like down here in my south, I'm just an hour north of the Gulf, and it can look great, weather forecast doesn't look bad at all, maybe a little light shower, and something blows up. And suddenly you've got an 80-mile-an-hour wind blowing, and it's just force winds and everything else. It came out of nowhere, it seems like. And those little tents would push down or blow up, and water would blow in, and everything inside the tent gets sopping wet. So here is how to fix that, okay? You carry additional tarp. You're the wind, you're the storm coming toward me. That 2 layers, here is the layer that's coming up from the ground cloth to go to the mesh, and here's my tarp. I can either take this additional tarp and go between those layers on the storm side. I can see it's coming, I can hear it. So it's going to obviously come from this direction. I'll go to that side of the tent, go between them, and anchor it up to the top and let it come out from underneath and anchor it all the way across the bottom. Now when the wind hits it, rather than it blowing this up, this can go up, but that tarp acts like a catch, like a shield between me and that. And I think tent manufacturers should simply manufacture a panel and call it a storm shield to put onto their tents. This is something you can manufacture. And I've done a couple of these where we've had a tarp that was, it's okay tarp, but it's giving up the ghost, really. I've recut it to act like one side of the tent underneath there. Roll it up, store it with the tent. That's the storm shield. Because the rain's coming from that direction, it's going to be a heavy storm. I put it there to catch that wind and keep stuff from blowing in to the inside. That is a little tip that will make your life so much better. It doesn't have to be big and fancy. It's just got to be something that this is the side of the tent. It's got to come all the way to the top of the tent underneath the rain fly and wrap around on either side maybe a foot. And I can just stake it to the ground and leave it hooked to the top apex up here. It can be relatively loose, but when that wind hits it, it'll go up and over the top rather than into the tent. That makes a difference. Now this basic design scales up. And this is something that I encourage you when you go to purchase a tent and you're looking for such a tent. You'll go to the store and they'll have the tent sitting there and they'll have a wonderful package on it, and you'll have people sitting out front of it, you know, roasting marshmallows or whatever. Great picture. Look at the dimensions, because the picture may be slightly deceiving and make you think it's a lot bigger than it is. For many years I worked at Walmart in sporting goods, and there was this one tent we had that came back many times that there was nothing wrong with the tent, but the picture, when you looked at the picture, that tent looked as big as this Pathfinder. It ain't. It was only about 4 foot tall. But the picture on the box with the couple sitting out front roasting the marshmallows gave you the illusion, man, that thing's 7.5 feet tall. It wasn't. It was only 4 foot tall. And see, read the dimensions. That 4-footer can still be good. That's great for one person, because I set it up. It's quick to set up. I unroll it. I put my 4 corner stakes out. I take my poles, put them together, put them on the edge, bow it up, put my rain fly over. If I'm going to have storm, I have my rain shield handy, my storm shield. If not, just a standard over the top be fine. I unzip the circular door, unzip the mesh door, and I put into it my sleeping bag straight across. On my right hand side, I put my lantern, my stuff light, so when I'm laying on my back, it's right there. And on my left hand side goes the other clothing and stuff I'm not going to need right now. And all my gear can come in the tent with me. And that's an advantage, because remember, inclement weather. If I wake up in the morning, man, it's howling rain. But I'm dry, and it's not a lot of wind, it's just a heavy downpour. I can sit in my tent, sit up easily in my tent, and be able to work on my stuff, pull heat and eats out of my pack that I don't have to heat up, and be able to, you know, read a book, whatever, and just wait it out without any major problems. That's I couldn't do in a bivvy because you're laying there in a body bag. Well, now you've got room to maneuver. So that single person small tent, even though it says 2 people, some of them even say 4 people. I always have it, if it says it is a 4-person tent and it's 4 foot tall, that's 2 people and gear, okay? If it says it's a 2-person tent that's 4 foot tall, that's really a 1-person and gear to be comfortable, okay? Now let's scale that up. Now you can get the tent that'll tell you it's a 6 or 8, and you look at the dimensions, and it is this tall. You know, it tells you that the center apex is 7 feet. A 7 foot tall tent means I can unzip the door and just duck my head down and go into it and stand up inside. Now this will have certain advantages, especially if I have to change clothing or stuff. I could do it standing up. This will give me a lot more air room above me in case of a storm. Remember, it pushing down, I got a lot more headspace up there. This can even get as big as a 12-person tent, and really that's a group tent. And so now let's discuss, we've discussed the basic design of the modern type tent. Now let's discuss application. How many? If you're a 1-person and I'm wanting a backpack, I'm wanting something I'm going to carry on my rucksack, and I'm going to set up for me, and I'm in a good enough physical shape that I can get up and down off the ground pretty easily, get one of those low 3 or 4 foot tall 2-person tents that suits your needs. And then create one of those storm flies that I'm talking about, those storm flaps to go up under to protect you from blowing rain. If you have a wife and you've got, you know, you're going on car camping and you're going to get there and set up, get a 6-person. Because you're going to need the room. I recommend in a, you know, once you get up where you got a head high, 7 foot tall, look at the low cots. There's several that fold up relatively small and compact. And getting your wife up off the ground. If we're not backpacking, okay? If we are backpacking, bicycling, or something like that, it is better to have 2-person tents where your wife has one, you have one, you set them up side and side. It's just better. If we're using conveyance and we've got a car or something like that, then yeah, go for a 6-person and get low cots. Now even better. Or one of them inflatable air mattresses. A lot of people prefer those. Something to get you up. You're looking at comfort. Now if you've got kids or something and you have small children, like under 10 years old, then I recommend, if you're going to get for yourself, your wife, and 2 kids, get an 8-person tent, because you're going to need the room. Them little ones can just spread out like wigglies. They're everywhere. And so you're going to need the room. You do not want to get claustrophobic in one of these tents. And I don't mean that from the literal, but I mean that the kids are going to spread out. They're going to have their stuff. You're stepping all over stuff. It's just far better to go too big than it is to try to work with too small. And then finally, if my kids are above the age of 10 and they're big enough and responsible enough that I can carry them backpacking or whatever, camping, then they should have their own 2-person tent. Because now I'm carrying my 2-person tent, my wife is carrying her 2-person tent, and my 2 children, each one is carrying their own 2-person tent, and we'll just set up on a little compound right here. And a good idea is to set up Daddy over here, the 2 kids, and then Mommy. And make sure that the doors for the kids' tents face Mommy and Daddy's tent. So they got a zip right there next to where you're sleeping. You'll hear them. And that prevents kids wandering off, you know, in the middle of the night because they decided they wanted to go look at the stars or whatever. Just experience talking. It makes sense, a lot more sense to do it that way. Now, let's step out of the modern nylon tent. How about canvas tents? I am a huge fan of canvas tents, guys. But I come from a living history background, and I saw a lot of old Army GP mediums and stuff like that that'd be purchased in surplus set up on a farm and used as a barn, you know, and that thing be there 10, 12 years outdoors. A U.S. Army heavy as, God, those things were heavy. You know, GP medium tent. I personally had, back in the 1990s, what was called an armorer's tent. It was a big metal frame and a big, huge canvas front and back and a big cover that went over, had big windows, and it was meant to set up in a rear area for a base, where it could be an office, it could be a whatever, it could be a workshop to work on vehicles, it could whatever. It was, my center top was 12 feet tall, I think it was, and it was like 14 by 14 square, with my side walls were 8 foot high. Leaned in like that and it zipped up. That was a big, huge, massive tent. Now, could I have put that on a piece of land and used it as a cabin? Yes. I bought that tent surplus for $300 from a surplus dealer with the frame and all. I set that up on the side of the house because we did not have a carport, and at that time I was restoring a old classic Chevy C10 pickup. And that tent sat out in the rain all day, every day, through hurricanes, through cold weather, through everything for 11 years, until finally the roof started giving up and it started leaking. It did not leak for 11 years. Did I get my money out of $300? Yes, I did. And that's the thing about the big, heavy canvas tents. Man, they weigh a ton. But what is your objective here? Now, a good friend of mine, he had land along this creek that he had purchased. And he wanted a place to go down there that was not really a cabin, because he's not there. It's 30 miles away from his home. And so if I go build a cabin or whatever out in this remote location, it's going to be susceptible to be broken into and looted and robbed, because it is in the middle of nowhere. And so what he did as an alternative was this. He went out and created a platform. And this platform was, he took railroad ties that he got at the Home Depot, and he formed a rectangle the correct size. That rose the ground level up that much. He drove big rebar stakes down into the dirt through holes in it to hold it in place, and then he hauled sand in from the creek down there and poured it 5-gallon buckets at a time and packed it until he made a platform out of that. Okay? Then on the front and the back, he took a tree, he peeled actually a cedar is what he did, and put a cedar on either side and ran across, and went ahead and lag screwed it together. And on either side he made 2 rails that came up and went down and down. All of this was made out of local indigenous trees he just picked up. Okay? And then he put a series of cup hooks along that thing. There's the frame for the tent. So when he pulled up his truck, he picked up his big old canvas tent and he went up and he threw it over the top and he just pulled it out. The frame is already standing there and the edges are click, click, click. It was a wall tent. In 5 minutes, it was up. He rolled the doors open, he brought in his bed, he brought in his table, he whatever, and he had effectively a cabin for the weekend while he was here. When it was time to go, he rolled it up and put it back into the truck, leaving just the frame. There's nothing to steal. You know, railroad ties, you're going to steal a railroad tie? I mean, there was nothing he left down there worth stealing. Now, close by there, he had a cache where he left water, cooking pots and pans, things like that, that was buried and hidden where you couldn't see it. But the actual, what you'd think of a cabin, couldn't see it. But it was, he just walked out and threw his tarp up, boom, he had a portable cabin. It was actually a tent, okay? So that's something to consider from a family point of view if you're trying to put something out in an outlying area. Things like that. Or something that sets up quickly, okay? The modern nylon tents do have a fast setup time, and their poles and all included, very effective and can be great for that weekend retreat down to the creek or whatever. The canvas tents win when we start talking longevity, because maybe you have a place where I could set up a big tent, and I would recommend look for the military surplus tents. You will find they are done. Sometimes you got to repair them a little bit, but that U.S. military used that tent, that design, a heavy canvas, green canvas duck, for well over 100 years for a reason. You know, they set these things up in the tropics to the Arctic, and it had proven the most durable. You know, so if you can find one like that and you're wanting that kind of thing, it's a good investment. Now, I love a canvas wall tent, and if I'm going to be spending 2, 3, 4 weeks out here in the woods, it's going to be in a wall tent, because I know how to work that. It's comfortable, and it's a portable house in my regards. I am far more comfortable in that than I am a modern pop-up nylon tent, to be honest, for the durability. But it can serve, okay? Now, how big a tent do I need, Blackie? Do you have conveyance? If I'm going to haul it in on a car, haul it in on a canoe, haul it in on an ATV or whatever, weight ain't that big an issue now, is it? I want comfortably cover myself and whoever else I'm including, okay? I want to be able to stand up, and I need storage space inside if I'm going to be going for more than 3 days. Think of the cabin mindset. Think of it as a portable cabin, okay? If all I'm doing is weekend trips with me and the family, again, having a tent that's a 2-person per person for individuals is a much better, less bulk, less effort than it is to carry one big 12-person tent for everybody, because it is such a big thing. Small children, yes, I want them in the tent with me. But once they're over 10, they got their own tent. I want them to be independent and be able to set up their own tent so that they can do it outside of me. Now, here's another little adage, especially down here in my south. It might be up there in your blizzard country as well. I have the big family tent. I have a wall tent that is 12 by 14, and the center apex in it is 10 feet high. Side walls are 4 foot high. I have the poles to set that up. I can set it up by myself due to practicing from all them years in rendezvousing. I can set this tent up by myself in about 30 minutes max, actually a lot more like 20 minutes. And me and my wife have lived in that tent at Living History events for 14 days. That tent is in excess of 15 years old and is just as good right now as the day I bought it. My wife, using the nylon pop-up tents, like I said, for us going, has gone through at least 10 tents in the same amount of time, where seams have popped, given up, something's torn, ripped out, whatever. So for durability and the long idea, canvas is going to win. It's heavy as all get out, but it's going to win. For convenience and quickness, the nylon is the way to go. Now, this is really an overview of tents to conclude the shelter series for the Master Woodsman. And I've got from you guys feedback on what's the next topic we're going into in the Master Woodsman series. Because remember, this is going to be a book for me. And the first series was on fire, and I did the 3 fire videos. Now I've done shelter. And what you guys have requested, the next thing we go to is time to go for the tools. So the next video in the Master Woodsman series is going to be the bushcraft knife. We're going to do a video on the knives, then we're going to do a video on the axes, and we're going to do a video on the saws, and we'll probably do one on the other tools like hook knives and things like that for doing bushcraft. So we're going to edged tools. That's going to be the next series in the Master Woodsman series, and I hope you'll enjoy it. It'll be the same as this, where the cost of I will announce what the topic is going to be. And so that I am announcing now in July, the name of the topic of the Master Woodsman will be the bushcraft knife. Excuse me, the bushcraft knife. And so we will go to knives, and I will cover everything from the small little pocket knife on up to the big belt knives. Okay, and their advantages within bushcraft, woodscraft. I hope you enjoy it, and thank you very much for supporting my channel. And as always, guys, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. Till next time, guys, I'm Blackie, wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.